Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, ask a friend to select a Doctor Who story, I then watch it, and each episode I try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about the instalment might be.
Hi, I'm Reuben. I'm a Doctor Who fan. I'm picking The Green Death. It's the beginning of the end of the Unit family era and such a sweet goodbye to Joe Grant.
And so the fledgling is about to fly the coop. It's the final episode of The Green Death, Joe Grant's final episode of Doctor Who. Well, until relatively recently, when she returned. I remember Katie Manning saying in all interviews, and I saw her at a convention once as well, and her response was always, no, I would never go back. I've done Doctor Who. I mean, she lived in Australia as well, so it was impractical. But even when she was in the UK, she said, no, I've done it. I wouldn't come back, never look back. But of course, things change, and people are allowed to change their mind. And she came back first in Sarah Jane Adventures, and you go, okay, that's nice, but it isn't being in the actual show, is it? But we got to see her in The Power of the Doctor as well. So Katie Manning, having been one of the ones that thought probably wouldn't return to the series. We always asked this of companions in the sort of 80s of Doctor Who. There was always a kind of, one of the first things we'd ask a Doctor actor was, and would you ever go back to the series? Now, of course, I think that self-loathing fan thing, of course, is because, of course, the series is not now as good as it used to be, and it's quite, it would be marvellous if somebody from the olden days returned. And I remember always thinking that Mordred Undead was probably, I didn't see season 20 when it went out, for reasons I will explain probably when I get to one of those. They're very sad reasons, and it certainly wasn't because I didn't want to watch Doctor Who. This was the days before everyone had videos and things like that, or certainly anybody I knew. And but the idea, because Mordred Undead had somebody from old Doctor Who in it and some clips from old Doctor Who, it was automatically, well, that's going to be the best one of season 20. That was how our minds worked. And, I think we thought that, if the only thing stopping somebody coming back to Doctor Who ever was their choice. Whereas, of course, now, actors, probably most of them would have been more than happy to come back to Doctor Who. And, of course, most of them didn't leave by choice. We learned this. They did not. Some of the doctors didn't even leave by choice. Pertwee since said that, he would have stayed on. He just asked for more money and they called his bluff. But more so companions, and so, but I think we always thought that, again, in the 80s when Doctor Who fans, well, certainly I was particularly self-loathing, anything before me was automatically better than that which was of me and of my time. And so I thought that anybody from the olden days of Doctor Who, whereas of course history tells us, I've just been listening to Hamster with a Penknife talking about Pyramids of Mars, and of course they talk about Robert Holmes dealing with Jerry Davis and the Cyberman script and going, Doctor Who's changed since you were on it, and indeed season 12 it had Jerry Davis in it, Terry Nation, and John Lucarotti, and both Lucarotti and Davis were massively, all names from the 60s were massively rewritten, and Genesis of the Daleks is a much more sort of modern approach. It's very much in the Hinchcliffe mould. Now, I think the wisdom used to be, that was just rewritten by Robert Holmes, that's why it's good. Actually, the evidence doesn't seem to point to that, but Terry Nation responded well to, the edict that he had been given, which is Doctor Who's like this now. I'm sure there are Holmesian touches in there, though. I will, when I do a proper close look at Genesis, I'll be able to go into more detail with that when too much information gets there, when I'm about 85. Or just when I'm inclined to look, which I'm not at the moment because I'm looking at Doctor Who and the Green Death. So why I'm talking about... But yeah, Jerry Davis and John Lucarotti from the 60s were not... did not fit in with what Doctor Who was doing, 10 years later, because obviously things change in the course of 10 years. but in my head, and I'm sure in the head of a lot of fans, all that was stopping the old even my research into David Whittaker, he wasn't somebody that had distanced himself from the show because he'd gone on to greater things. He was scrabbling for work, sadly. But I think, we always associated, or I always associated, the older days, and the older the better, with quality, and that all it would need was, somebody from the olden days to come and, come and mend more recent Doctor Who. And I think that is part of the psychological makeup, or my psychological makeup anyway. I always go back to sort of prehistory. For things, which of course is mad. And I was thinking today also about fandom, and I think there's a bit of self-loathing in some of us fans in terms of the idea of Doctor Who is now made and written by the fans, etc., etc., as if that somehow taints it, as if somehow William Ems, was a better fit for writing Doctor Who than Russell T Davies or Paul Cornell or Rob Shearman, because they're fans, you see, so not really proper. Which of course the evidence is massively against. But there's something in there, I think, that in a certain mindset goes, but are they really because they're fans? Now, obviously, the evidence and the end result show that to be arrant nonsense. But I think it's still there within our fan psyche. Anyway, I don't know why that preamble has nothing to do. Well, I think it's because, yes, it's because we're at the end of Joe Grant, and for most of my life, Joe Grant was a companion that would never come back because Katie Manning had said, no, I don't really fancy it. But now that has changed, and now she has come back. So, nothing is ever without hope. If you like a thing from the older days, people will always change their mind. Well, and indeed, Tom Baker, Paul McGann, and Christopher Eccleston doing Big Finish, all and indeed conventions. In the case of Eccleston and McGann, all seem to be impossibilities at a certain point, and have actually all happened. So anything is possible. You just gotta keep going. And so let us now keep going as we get ready to watch The Green Death, episode 6. And so we are going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we go. Oh, and as I say, I always talk about the title sequence, but this is the last time that these opening titles are ever seen on screen, and not quite on British television, because of course there are repeats of Carnival of Monsters, Three Doctors, and Curse of Peladon, and Sea Devils. Yeah, a few, but anyway, I'm getting pedantic now. Oh, and talking of pedantic, I think it's Frank Shales who's very good at pointing out when I've got wrong, and he does it very nicely, so there's no objection. When I said that my first experience of Joe was Doctor Who and the Monsters and the Curse of Peladon repeat, but of course the Five Faces repeat had happened before that, so I'd seen her in the Three Doctors and Carnival of Monsters. Interesting, and I will have registered her in that, but I really fell in love with her. I think it's maybe because there's a love story in the King Peladon, and I remember her kissing King Peladon and being a bit jealous. So yes, I was aware of her, and I was definitely aware of her from the Planet of the Daleks novelization, where I'd originally thought she was a man because she was called Joe. But I will go into that when I do Planet of the Daleks. It's one of my more embarrassing moments where I tried to pass myself off as an expert and failed, which is why I'm always cautious about anybody that claims to be an expert on anything. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, I fell in. So I was aware of Joe from previous repeats, but it was the Curse of Peladon, I'm sure, that made me write TM for KH. TH for KM. I've just given us each other surname on my school exercise book. I remember doing it. And I've since got to meet her, but I've not managed to get her to fall in love with me, but there we go. So there we go. That's what is it? That's the mushroom stuff that looks like a giant Christmas pud. I do like all of this film stuff out in the countryside and the Land Rover and all that, because I'm from the countryside, so all of this feels so very real to me. And having Doctor Who in this setting, I find very comforting. I would, yeah. So they've managed to make it like actual beef. Which I would say, well, no, they're getting actually better at that with veggie food now. I mean, Quorn sort of always vaguely stood in for chicken, but I knew it was a compromise. I haven't eaten meat since I was 11 years old. I'm now 49. And I always craved a sort of something that was really like meat, because I like the taste of meat. I only didn't eat meat because I'm soppy about the animals. But I recently had some Marks and Spencer's chickeny nugget things, and they were almost too good, and it knocked me sick a little bit. But actually, because I haven't eaten meat in so long, and the meat substitutes I have had haven't really been like meat. But 10 years ago, I'd have loved something that was just like beef or just like bacon, but not so much now. But it's interesting that they're looking at a meat substitute in Doctor Who, to not just be a source of protein that replaces meat, but that actually, tastes like beef. I don't know quite what they've done at the Nut that I'm sure several scientists would spend ages to be able to make a fungus actually replicate the meat it was replacing. It's more likely that you get a protein that's like tofu or something like that stands as a replacement, but isn't something indistinguishable from the original, to steal a phrase. But anyway, it's the idea that because my uncle, on the other hand, who was vegetarian long before me, who's quite he's from London, he was the first vegetarian I knew. He doesn't like meat substitutes at all. He goes, no, I don't want a veggie sausage. He'll have a veggie moussaka, or he doesn't want something that's pretending to be meat. He sees that as not the point. Whereas I disagree. Whereas I would always disagree. I say I'm not eating meat because I don't want to eat it and don't like the taste. So I don't see having a meat substitute as a betrayal of that. But interesting, the differing. The differing perspectives of two people doing the same thing, essentially. Anyway, there we go. There's my treatise on what I look for in a meat replacement. So I've barely talked about the Green Death so far. Oh, and here we are back on. So I love the fact that it's the same two soldiers who are completely different soldiers from the ones on location. I love those maggots with the teeth and the slight bits sticking out of them. I think they're really effective. All these shots of the maggots are absolutely fantastic. And obviously they've grabbed these while they're on film. And look, they can bear a close-up. That's how good they are. They can really stand a close-up. And I love the fact that it's the Doctor doing it with Sergeant Benton. And doesn't he sort of do something comedic in a moment? We've already had a comedic moment where everybody passed the mock beef to the Brigadier, and then Benton was left holding the seitan. Is that raining there? But look, I don't know what that bit sticking out of the maggot is, but it just makes it look real. I think they've got wonderful skin, a wonderful colouring. They really are a superb piece of visual effects. They're dying like maggots. Is that a phrase? They're dying like maggots? But anyway, but here we are. So we've got, again, this is, I think the CSO has been improved in post by the restoration team. Now here's the giant fly, which always of legend was supposed to be awful, but I think it looks great in that shot. But it was always written up as one of the disappointments of the Green Death, which, seeing as it's so amazing on the book cover, and again, the Peter Brooks cover is my favourite, even though the follow-up cover is at John Geary is the fly on that is actually closer to the fly, but it's more like a sort of waspy mayfly type thing, whereas I quite like the giant blue bottle type that's on the Peter Brooks book cover. So it's always in my mind a giant blue bottle type, even though the actual one in the story is a bit more of a mayfly typey thing. Yeah, Yates has really been gone over here, but is he about to do something clever? Yes. Well done. I mean, that's the sort of maneuver you can only do in a certain type of television, where you can push two men into another man and the lift will close and you can run away. But that's okay. It was pretty well staged. So here's a model Bessie. Now there we go. Kitty, 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 come and get your lovely din-dins is a very Sergeant Benton thing to do, and I love Sergeant Benton when he's only trying to have fun, and he gets into trouble, and then he's a bit hapless about it. That's a great Sergeant Benton interaction for me. I think that flies okay. I mean, it's obviously not walking on those legs. It's obviously being sort of pushed a bit, but I don't think it's as bad as the Fly of Repute. And I think it really stands. That close up's great, and I think the eyes are dead right. You know, they're like the eyes of a fly. If you've ever seen a fly close up, or you've had, my brother used to stick flies on. Well, God, he used to be quite cruel. Actually, he used to stick them on cactuses, or no, he wasn't very nice. He's a nice boy now. Well, he is a very nice man, but he's a bit of a strange one. Anyway, I think let's not get into what my brother used to do with flies, but I think that's okay. Again, it's difficult because I think the CSO was probably originally a little harsher, but that's great. I think that the squirting of the green, that's lovely. It squirts the green death, and that's a pretty good animation. And when we're on film, it actually matches the film quite nicely. And there's a very satisfying neck break. Oh, and you can see a bit of green death on the Doctor's windshield as well, on Bessie's windshield. So I think that's something that's supposed to have been a bit of a compromise. Look at it. You can see that. I think the wings are lovely, and I like the way that the Doctor thinks that even something as deadly as a malevolent green goo spitting giant fly is beautiful. That to me is a very doctory thing. It reminds us that his alienness. That's actually a really good leap there from Captain Yates. That's quite high. It reminds us of the Doctor's alienness, that he can see the beauty in something that we have been conditioned to see as, grimy and horrible and skin crawly because it's a little creepy crawly. Whereas to the Doctor, it's a fascinating creature and the product of science. And I like it when the Doctor's like that, because it's a lesson to us. And Pertwee again carries off that kind of thing brilliantly. I do like this outfit of his, actually. I think the blue with the burgundy piping is a really nice mix. I really like the colours of that. And she's a little bit, she's not unburgundy herself with her jumper, is she? It's almost like they're meant to be together. No, obviously not. Their costumes actually kind of match. Yay! It's Mike Yates, who, I mean, he can pass as a man from the Ministry, but he certainly wouldn't be in the army with that haircut, would he? So yes, serendipity, the fungus that killed the maggot. Beautiful. Quorn to the rescue. But aren't they good, those maggots? They are. I think those maggots are one, and this is of course called The One with the Maggots. I think they are one of the all-time classic Doctor Who monsters. They're so memorable to people that watch them at the time. They stand the test of time, and they're one of those great, it's a perverse, mutated, scary version of something that is actually, real. That you could find. And as I say, we used to see maggots quite a lot in the countryside where I'm from, because there's always dead birds and things. I really like John Dirth's interpretation of Boss. I think it's I think it helps that Jerome Willis although is subservient as Stevens, is also, you know, he's making it clear that he's being quite patient with a superior who is nonetheless a bit unpredictable and in need of indulging. I think it's a really lovely performance from Willis. I did get a letter. I did get a letter from him, but we didn't converse about Doctor Who. I assumed that time would come because he was still around, you see. I was delighted when he turned up in Space Precinct as Captain Podley. I mean, Space Precinct isn't great, but although Richard James, who's in it, who did Happy Times and Places on The Visitation, has written an excellent book on it, and it makes you think more fondly of it because you could see the sort of hard work that went into it, and mistakes were made, and I think that, you know, that's obvious. I mean, you don't give Idris Elba an early job and then dub him, but there we go. But Jerome Willis wasn't dubbed, but you don't see his face because he's an alien, and he plays it as a sort of in an Irish brogue, as the sort of police captain. But I was very pleased to see him. Playing essentially one of the leads, and he does get promoted to the opening credits, and so you know, he does have a later stab at sci-fi fame by being in, albeit a compromised and not ultimately successful sci-fi show shot over here, but they had a bash, and it was always nice to see somebody from Doctor Who cropping up, especially in doing something important. He's actually quite sympathetic, Stevens. And he's doing this all on his own. He's acting to a voice, and you know, a static set that's because he can't see the voice, whatever it's called, the voice wobbly bit. What's that called? I've got one on the recording device I've got here. I've got my own boss. Terry Walsh there as the guard. Terry Walsh is sometimes a better actor than other times, and there's not necessarily a reason why he is or isn't. He sometimes does his lines pretty well, and sometimes seem to call him Monster of Peladon when he's the guard captain. He's not at his best, but he's all right. He's not as good an actor as some of the other stuntmen like Max Faulkner and Derek Ware. But, I mean, Derek was a rather trained actor, really, who graduated into stunt work. And it's quite a novel. It's quite a fun idea, isn't it? This computer, has been fed all of this sort of language and art and culture, and has gone sort of too far with it, so that even though it's a sort of superior creation, he's actually really annoying. So it's not only that he's got ideas above his station and wants to, you know, control the world and people and all of that. He's also gone too far in, you know, his appreciation of art and music and all of that, and it kind of makes more sense of the sort of insane computer thing, which is a bit of a trope. It is a bit of a cliche, but they sort of really go with it. He's not just a ranting, cruel, computer bent on destruction. He's gone extreme in all the other areas as well, even to the extent that he's power up a pumming. That looks great. The mending of Professor Jones looks pretty uncomfortable, but we buy it. She's so pretty, isn't she? And lovely, Jo. And she loves Professor Jones. And of course, this whole story has been building up to Jo's departure, and I think it's beautifully, and she's earned it because, of course, she's been in it for 3 years. Oh yes, of course. And Stevens is now, which is quite sad. But he does still exist. And this I think is going to be my other favourite part of the story. I think because of course it's pretty obvious that Jo's departure will be my choice for this episode. but there's a rare occurrence in classic Who that Stevens will give us shortly, which I hope that you will acknowledge with me, which I think might end up being my bonus thing. And I am slightly biased towards Jerome Willis because he worked on that show with my brother. He was one of the first Doctor Who actors I sort of encountered in my own orbit, and also because I was so pleased that he put in his programme notes Doctor Who and the Green Death, in which he played the lead villain. You know, he went to a bit of extra trouble with his Doctor Who credit. Not long, you know, this was early 80s, not long before actually actors stopped putting Doctor Who in their theatre credits. I know a few actors who actually in the late 80s and in the 90s decided not to put Doctor Who in their theatre biogs because they were a bit embarrassed by it. Now, Jerome Willis does all of this very well. You need a good actor to wrestle with this kind of thing, and he is a superior actor. And in fact, I think there's something about him at the RSC. I think he was in one of the first RSC companies, and I remember when it turn 50, because it was the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre first, of course, and then it became the RSC. I've got a feeling he was in that first RSC season, and then when it turned 50, he was in The Tempest, playing Gonzalo, the old man. And so I think he'd returned to the company to celebrate its 50th year. He did some sort of landmark like that with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So, you know, he was a highly regarded member of the profession, Jerome Willis, and he's in the Sandbaggers, and cropped up often on television in, you know, good character parts, but and did a lot of fine classical theatre work. So we love a bit of Jerome Willis, and I love the way that Steve, you know, always, you know, when humanity wins through against control, despotism, machinery, and I love the way that I love a human sacrifice. Human sacrifice always brings a lump to my throat and a tear to my eye. It's the bravest thing you can do, and it's in Doctor Who terms. Yeah, I love it. And he's, you know, he's sort of fed this in throughout, that he has been, you know, slightly perturbed or disquieted or reluctant. And here he wins out against the brainwashing, and that's a very Doctor Who thing, where, you know, humanity is deeply flawed, and it's easy to be pessimistic about humanity and you know, we're always on the lookout for people's faults these days and catching people out and getting, you know, pointing out where they've gone wrong on social media, whereas actually I think it's a much more benevolent thing to do, to say, no, we all want, you know, we all have the potential to be good, and Doctor Who kind of says, you know, we've all got it within us, and that humanity is what makes us special, not what makes us bad. I love the fact it goes totally silent. And look, he's got a tear. He's got a tear. He's crying. You do not see many tears in classic Doctor Who, and certainly not from men. So I love the single tear going down Stephen's face, and I love the way it goes silent as it goes into the close-up of him, where all the sound cuts out, no music, anything. It's a complete reversal of what we're used to, whereas actually normally when we hit a climax, it you know, the music and everything builds to a crescendo. There it cuts out, and it has that brief moment of kind of, this is the end, and humanity and Boss has got, I love it. I love that. I think it's wonderful. Oh, look at Jo's funky outfit. Of course, she's dressed for the evening now. Her trousers go up quite a long way. That's very Simon Cowell. Or is that her jumper? Or is it a one piece? Difficult to tell. Oh, Jo is going to leave Doctor Who. Yes, and so he's going up the Amazon. Oh, Jo. More than anything else in the world. Oh, bless. Oh, I think I'm going to be wanting to go on the telephone. See, they. I mean, of course, if somebody said that in real life, but they kind of make it work. I love the way he sort of says sorry, love, as though he doesn't quite get it. It's beautifully done by Stuart Bevan. That because that could be awful. It could not work. It might not work. And of course, it's not really that realistic, but because he's this single-minded scientist, and he is this kind of doctor figure. Oh, Mike's gutted. Although you never quite believe Mike and Joe, do you? He's yeah. You can't imagine Mike sweeping Joe off her feet particularly. Oh yeah, you're going to take it from the man now, are you, Professor Nuts? So much for your blooming homemade wine. You're sucking at the corporate teat now. But that's still all the compromises, isn't it? That's the thing. Oh yeah, because she's got an uncle at the United Nations. She's actually, for all her klutziness, Joe's pretty well connected. She's a nepo baby. It's a nepo baby, isn't it? Although I do know people who pronounce it nepotism. Andrew Staines, who was Barry Letts's nephew, pronounced it nepotism. Anyway, Joe, she hides it well with all this sort of scatty I'm a klutz thing. She's got a really powerful uncle. Pertwee is beautiful here. I like it when the Doctor is sad, because there has to be a price for being funny and intelligent and brave and crusading, because otherwise, there's too much loftiness. Otherwise, the Doctor is like a sort of distant god, and the Doctor should be your best friend. I mean, there's wonderful moments of Olympian detachment, but I don't like I don't like a Doctor that is sort of too immune to everything. The Doctor needs faults. The Doctor needs vulnerability. He knocks that back, and Pertwee, who is so good at dignity, and he's very powerful, and he's very strong, and he's very self-possessed. This is it's so sad. It really is sad. I love the way this is done, and I love that little look Joe gives, and I love the fact that it's all unsaid, and that the Doctor would rather. And I know that I've done this at last nights. I blub, I hide in the loos, and I cry, and then I have to sort of sneak off. I don't like goodbyes, and I think I maybe get that from Doctor Who. The inability to sort of sit in that uncomfortable moment. I do find it really sad, and so this really resonates. And the fact that the Doctor would rather sneak off, sad, lonely, having put on a brave face, having not made it about him, having not been mean to Joe or anything like that. And Katie does that beautifully, but it's not all happiness, because she's going to miss the Doctor, and that's a wonderful, wonderful shot, and it's so bleak and sad and lonely, and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. That is such a great ending, and of course the closing credits are like episode 5. So is it 2, 5 and 6 that are upside down? So if Peter's theory is correct, it means they didn't do them in the same order. Anyway, that's pure speculation. So actually, the last time the closing credits, I said the opening titles was the last time at the beginning of this episode. So the closing titles properly for the last time are 2 episodes ago, episode 4 of the Green Death, because these are slightly wrong. They're upside down, and the next story has completely different titles, and the next story is The Time Warrior, which is the story that I was born through. So the Green Death is also the last full Doctor Who story to have been broadcast before I was born, and so again, because it's pre-me, I always think of it as slightly better than anything that came after that hasn't been tainted by my presence on the earth. But I'm happy with the fact that I appreciate older things and things that came before, because I think it behoves us to acknowledge that nothing that we have happened without the progress, the development, the skill of people who came before us, and things that we take for granted we wouldn't know how to do if it wasn't for those people, and it does not behove us to take credit for them. And I mean that in terms of technology, but as well as sort of societal progress. Anyway, I think I've probably rehearsed that conversation many times. Well, I really enjoyed The Green Death. As I've said quite a lot last time, it's one that I'd always felt was slightly compromised by its production, but it's not at all, because I care less about those things. Time has been kinder. Time has been a bit of a leveler. I do think the CSO has been slightly improved by the restoration team. Whether I approve of that or not is a conversation for a different day. We can go into that at some other time. When I speak to the boys, they very much justify it and go, well, there are all sorts of things that change. You're not watching it on the same sort of device. Most people would have watched it in black and white. There's all sorts of things that mean it's not like it was, and the way that it was captured, and the fact that all sorts of different reasons why a tinker here or there is no different to some of the things that just happen by the process of airing an archival show. That means it doesn't look exactly the same as it would have done when it was broadcast. But again, I think that's partially me going, but the people doing the tinkering are fans, and the people who did it originally were not fans, so they are more real people because I'm a fan and I don't like and I'm rubbish. So that I think there's the bit of it all comes. All my reservations about anything come from a certain amount of self-loathing, I think. Which in itself is a form of narcissism, because it does mean everything's about you. So I'm not saying it to make anybody feel sorry for me. Self-loathing is the motivator of a narcissist. It's just a very good disguise for it. It's all the psychological games we play. Anyway, one of the psychological games I play is to watch Doctor Who and to chat about it and to get enthused by it and to dive deep in it, because it stops all the other noise. That's what it does for me. Except for when I overthink it and think about why I like things and don't like things and or not, like I've just done. Anyway, Doctor Who is my escape route. Doctor Who takes me to my happy place, but also in that case a very sad place. I think that departure, I think it's beautifully real. I think it's very economical. I mean, it is fed throughout the story, and I mean it's fairly clear from episode 1 now that we know that she's on her way out. But so they signpost it, but they feed it in. I think the relationship between Joe and Cliff is very authentic and very beautifully done. I think Stuart Bevan, his performance is underappreciated. I've never seen it slagged off, but I think he has a damn hard job, and he does it very, very, very well. And as I say, the way he sells that, let's get married, and when she says we didn't talk about it, he's slightly quizzical about the whole thing, and it's beautiful the way the Doctor excuses himself. And the fact that it takes place in the Nut Hutch, which does feel like a real place. I think the ambience there and the little bits of fluty music they have in the background and all of that, I think really work. I think the hippies aren't sort of stereotypical peaceman hippie types. I mean, the only one that speaks is Nancy, but they could have gone far further with that and made them slightly irritating or comical or foolish, and they don't do any of that. Or they could have made them sanctified versions, and they don't. They just make them kind of real. And a show that can often deal with character types or caricatures, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Doctor Who is often about sort of spoofing or matching a genre, and often yes, you have character types, and I think that's fine if there's still a truth to them. But actually, I think they judge all of that very nicely. I really believe in the Nut Touch, and so the backdrop in which she leaves, I think, is an authentic one that feels right. It just feels right. So, of course, my thing for episode 6 is going to be Joe's leaving, and it's not just it's the whole sequence. I could have just chosen that final shot, but that would be to undermine the work done by the way they've done the setting. I think that the tone of it, I like the fact that it's a little bit funny, and then it's the big celebration where everyone gets a bit of a hug and a hurrah, and then you have that lovely the Doctor quietly leaving of his own accord. It's dark outside, and then but you still feel, oh, okay, we've got the Doctor going, and that's sad, but we do want to have one more sight of Jo, and we see Jo, and she's happy, and then, but we also need her to be a little sad, and she's a little sad, and that's all done without Katie Manning saying anything. She gives a look to the Doctor, she hugs Cliff, and then we see the look on her face, which is a mixture of, joy, and she obviously loves him, and I think that's beautiful, but also sadness, and that's the sadness that we feel. And then you get that final beautiful shot of the Doctor riding off into the sunset alone, in the only woman that's ever been truly faithful, Bessie. Oh, it's lovely, pitch perfect, beautifully done, well done to all concerned, and well done to Katie Manning, who I think I've said this before. We often think that because Katie is slightly barking and fun and effervescent, I think we sometimes think that she's like Jo, but she's not really like Jo at all, even to the extent that her Jo voice is different to her Katie voice. It's much more of an acting performance than I think we sometimes give it credit for being. And I love Jo. She's a brilliant Doctor Who companion. And she's a great match for Pertwee. I think their rapport is fantastic, and I love his performance in that. I don't think I give Pertwee enough credit sometimes as an actor, because he's he wasn't an experienced drama actor, and he's a man of star quality, so often no acting required, because he's John Pertwee. He speaks well, he looks amazing, he holds himself well, he's got a great presence and physicality. I don't think I'd want to see his his King Lear in the way that I would want to see Troughton's or Tom Baker's, and most of the Doctors actually. I don't see Pertwee quite like that, but in the same way, none of them could have, none of the some of our other doctors could have done some of the the Navy Lark or some of the comedic stuff that Pertwee did, even though they're all good comedy actors. It's to say one can do one thing and not the other is not pejorative, but Pertwee, I think, is less of a dramatic classical actor. I mean, that's just a fact than most of the others. But what he has is he has a bouquet. No, he has a star quality. Which gets him through, NAR, no acting required, often, because he has all the natural accoutrements that can get him through a scene, in the way that a lot of movie stars who might not necessarily be the best actors in the world, they don't really need to be, which sounds like a contradiction, but I think it's in terms of what we understand acting as being, which is range, access to emotions, various other things. But anyway, having said that, he's bloody great in those closing scenes, and I think nobody does. Considering he's the man of action and the dandy and the gadgets guy and the slightly arrogant, pompous one, nobody does that kind of taking one for the team, that kind of I will hold my emotions in check, but there's a real vulnerability underneath, as well as him at times, actually, and I think he's beautiful in that. So well done, John Pertwee, whose acting I often think I overlook. I think his acting in that is superb, really, really good. So yeah, Jo's exit, obvious, and of course my bonus thing, I think I was going to choose Jo's departure as my thing for the whole story, but I've got a feeling Reuben's going to choose Jo's exit for episode 6. So my bonus thing is also from episode 6, which I don't think Reuben's going to choose, because he's chosen much more general things, I think. Is I love that moment of Stevens, and it's because it involves Jerome Willis as well, who I'm often drawn to just go, well, I'm going to pick that guest actor, because guest acting is often my favourite thing. I like the guest turns. I like the character actors. I like the new people who come in and make a story unique because of their presence. But So he could easily have been chosen because he's so great in all of the episodes, but it's not just him here. So I feel like I'm not cheating quite so much. It's the cutting out of the sound, beautiful, the way it just goes silent, and it's that solitary tear, because we don't get solitary male tears in Doctor Who. It's a really interesting way to dispatch your lead villain. He is the lead villain. And again, it makes sense in terms of what Jerome Willis has seeded throughout in his performance, that moment of humanity doesn't come out of nowhere. And it's actually very, very touching. And again, it's that very Doctor Who-y thing of the real danger is the ranting machine, the science gone wrong. And what defeats it is an appeal to the last vestiges of humanity, the good things of humanity that are there if we're optimistic. And Doctor Who is an optimistic show. If we, and it's easy to be cynical and, oh God, my natural predilection is to be cynical, and being cynical feels grown up. But I think it's much better to hope that within us all we have the possibility to be good and for redemption, and that what we consider to be the great assets of our species will win out over, our baser instincts, or science gone wrong, or tyranny. So yeah, it's Stephen's final moments. I was just going to go for the tear itself, but I think it's part of so many other things that also it touches upon, which, yeah, Jerome Willis crying a tear as the sound goes quiet and humanity wins out over wayward machine intelligence. So those are my two things. What has Reuben Herfindahl chosen as his final choices for the Green Death, which is episode 6? And here we are.
It has to be the leaving scene. We were seeing Joe leave. The Doctor is legitimately sad. This is not Bill Hartnell leaving Susan behind. This is way more emotional. I can't watch this without shedding a tear. This is truly the end of an era. And, you can tell the Doctor truly has his heart broken. And then that scene with Bessie and the Doctor driving away just breaks my heart every time.
Ah, now yes, you see, I knew it was going to be that. Has he done? Oh no, there's no. Oh, it doesn't seem to be a bonus. Oh well, never mind. Oh, hello, it's Toby from the future. As if by magic, or is it serendipity, what landed in my inbox this morning was, this is the future, by the way. The rest of the podcast will take place after this, but I'm nipping in to slip in from the future what arrived in my inbox from Reuben this morning, just after I'd sort of recorded and saved the rest of the podcast. But that's okay. By the magic of radio, here's Reuben a few years later.
So this is an odd one. I forgot to record my favorite thing about the Green Death about 2 years ago when I recorded this. During the pandemic and all that kind of fun stuff. So I only realized that when I listened to episode 5 on the Patreon feed. So I can't cheat and go back and listen to something. So I'm just going to go with Unit. I love the Unit family. It's part of the reason why the Pertwee years are my favorite years. The Brigadier, Mike Yates, Benton, Pertwee, Joe. It's my favorite comfort food to go back to time and time again. And on the upside, the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, and what a great episode, what a great time. God bless.
Well, time passes, pandemics come and go, but some things don't change. I'm still a loser, but the unit family is a good call, and comfort is the right word. Anyway, back to the past. I wasn't going to win anyway. It just means Reuben gets one less thing to talk about, but that I probably didn't explain the rules properly. I did a lot of this in a flurry, you know. Anyway, that's fine. I'd have lost anyway, so we can, let's all choose a bonus moment for the Green Death episode 6. Why not, eh? It doesn't matter. And do you know, I was thinking that when Reuben was admitting to sort of shedding a tear and thinking, you know, we're grown men watching something designed for the sort of kids, or at least a family audience of 1974, 4, and we're, you know, there's part of me that goes, oh dear, silly us, you know, aren't we silly? Because I did when I was watching Pertwee and talking about it, I did get a lump to my throat, and I did find it quite moving, even though I've seen it loads of times before, and even though it's in a silly children's sci-fi show from the olden days. And I sort of thought, God, aren't we a bit daft? And actually, no, do you know what? There are worse things than being moved. There are worse, and it doesn't matter what you're moved by. If you're in touch with your emotions, it's better than suppressing your emotions, isn't it? It's better than being like Boss, the cold, arrogant computer. We lose nothing by being in touch with our emotions, so long as, you know, it's containable, and it's catharsis, isn't it? Watching something that unleashes our emotions. That's why we like being scared when we read fairy stories or even Doctor Who or whatever. There's something about experiencing it. It gives those muscles, if you like, a workout, so that we're then better able to cope with fear when it happens in real life, because it's not as much of a shock to the system, because we have rehearsed it in a safe environment. And I think it's the same about emotions. There's a catharsis of having a good cry, and there's something about working that emotional muscle that is good for us, and that is, you know, what is it? Sad is happy for deep people. But there is, and I, you know, there are those who would be predisposed to laugh and mock a couple of middle-aged blokes who've never met but are united across the pond by our love for this show, and us talking about the fact that we get a lump in our throat when a companion leaves the Doctor, and it's a bit sad. Even though, you know, their relationship is one that can only be defined in a certain way because it's, you know, family-friendly tea time escapist television. So, you know, it's not as broad and real as relationships are often depicted on television these days. But it's utterly truthful. The dynamic between Joe and the Doctor is totally believable in its own terms and in the way that it is told, and in the truth that is transmitted by those two performers, who have a lovely rapport, and I totally believe it. And you know what? If two middle-aged guys from who've never met but united by the love of this show find that watching it, you know, tweaks an emotional gland, and gives that part of our psychological makeup a bit of a workout, in order to, you know, even just surface that motor, you know, give the lachrymose engine a tweak. We can be mocked for that, but I'd rather be like that than be somebody who, and I'm not great with emotion. I find emotion, and I'm not pleading any uniqueness in this or any that or claiming to be special. Emotions are hard to deal with and hard to process, and one of the things that has helped me in life negotiate often quite difficult emotions is the fact that I've had an outlet for my fears, for my anxieties, for my joys, and for the bits that sort of get me in the gut, which are self-sacrifice and people going and never seeing them again, which is that episode has both of which sort of get me a bit in the gut. I am Doctor Who has helped with those things, and I am better for the fact that I have had Doctor Who in my life to help that. And we all have things that are our outlets. You know, football fans have an outlet for heightened emotion and expressing themselves in a way that they might not be able to in other circumstances. I mean, we're always comparing ourselves to football fans and saying that we're better. And I think a lot of the way that Doctor Who fandom manifests itself, or the things that Doctor Who spurs, can in some ways be more positive than I've seen football fans behave in a mob mentality way on the tram or whatever. But I also know that football fandom can be great for communities and can be great for a sense of belonging, and maybe it does act as an outlet for energies that might be used in a worse way. Did they not have the football terrace outlet? So, I'm not going to be too. I don't want to be too sort of snobbish about football fandom in a way that I think it's sometimes very tempting to be. Although I think deep down I probably am, if I'm honest. But human beings are weird. We are biological machines. And we have a need to exercise up physically, but I also think we have a need to exercise emotionally. And that's where storytelling comes in, because it allows us to rehearse, to experience, and to have an outlet for, or to have provoked emotional responses that give those muscles a workout that they might not otherwise get, which is why we're drawn to stories, which is why we're drawn to make-believe, because it enables us to rehearse situations so that when we do encounter them in real life, we can perhaps cope with them a little bit better, or perhaps have comfort in the fact that we felt those emotions in a way that is safe and is containable. I certainly feel that about Doctor Who. Doctor Who was designed to sort of scare me, keep me on the edge of my seat, and the sad bits are designed to make me sad. But I find with all of those things a weird comfort. I'm sad about Joe's departure, but I find it comforting that that's a containable sadness that sort of gets me every time, and it's rather beautiful and it's sweet because I guess because I know it, but it never fails. I've never become immune to it, even though I know the shots, I know the performances, and I know that it's coming because it's so beautifully done. And I think that is because, as the Green Death tells us, aside from the beautiful environment, the clever environmental message and the forward-thinking nature of it, and the fact that it does Doctor Who's thing of taking an everyday thing, flies and maggots, and making them larger and scarier versions, and all of that. What the Green Death really tells us is that it's better to be a flawed human being who can shed a tear than to be a ranting, unfeeling, arrogant machine. Amen to that. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Reuben Herfindahl, who can be found on Twitter, aka X at Orac666. I'm grateful to Reuben and to the many patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Siobhan Galichon, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Ian K. McLachlan, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sarillo, Frank Shales, Andrew and Lisa, Kat Armitage, John Arnold, Kevin Ashelford, Luke Atkins, James Bell, David Bickley, Will Brooks, Gary Byrne, Robin Bland, Robbie C., Alex Gaffajoglu, Paul Carnahan, Paul Caddington, Andy Case, John Curley, Mark Dakin, Rob Dawson, John Elledge, Mark Findlay Smith, Joe Ford, Gary Gillett, Paul Goodridge, Lisa C. Greco and David Green. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out after that I've driven into the sunset, all on my lonesome, but without quaffing a glass of champagne, all in one go. I mean, he does it very well, but it's a waste of good champagne. But still, I get the sentiment, if not the treatment of. It was probably actually. Hang on, it's Joe's wedding, so it's probably Nut Hutch champagne, so it's probably god awful Peapod champagne. Yes, Peapod rhubarb spumante. But anyway, I still think you should yeah. Anyway, he does it very sadly. So, but I'm not doing that. I am here with a cup of tea. Earl Grey hot, actually, from a different show. But please, if you would like to support this level of nonsense with your hard-earned cash, why would you want to do that? You can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you get this stuff even earlier, perhaps put you out of your misery, get it earlier, 6 months earlier in the case of Happy Times and Places, and at least a month earlier for Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information. The other two podcasts, which have been a bit slow coming out lately, I apologise for that. I am working out ways to step on the gas with those, but real life gets in the way as well. But patrons always take priority. If you're getting this on iTunes or Spotify or any of those places, if you were in Patronville, you'd have had this a lot earlier. You'd have had extra releases, you'd have had bonus material, and you'd have had monthly AMAs and other bits and bobs of access and exclusives. And that starts from as little as £3 a month, and whatever tier you're on, whatever tier you're on, you get all of the audio and video content. There are little trinkets to lure you up the scale, but it's really fairly egalitarian. It's pay what you're inclined to, really. It's a voluntary thing. Really, there's no great bonuses for going any further up the tiers, and I'm really grateful to those who do. It's extremely generous. It's a very giving model, this, actually, because it means people give what they're comfortable and what they feel they can afford, and that makes it slightly less embarrassing. Soliciting for cash, which is essentially what I'm doing. But, I don't have a pension, I don't have holiday pay, I'm a freelance creative, and this is what we have to do. So why am I apologising? I'm not. I mean, I sort of am. I do feel slightly anyway, but not so awkward that I'm not doing it. So get over yourself. Okay, I will. So patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. £3 a month is the lowest tier. You can even get 10% off that and off any tier if you sign up for a year in one go. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Hadoke if you don't want to be tied to a monthly thing. You don't get any bonuses there, but the satisfaction of buying a pretend coffee for I was going to say starving artist, if it's a coffee for a thirsty, cold and caffeine light artist who needs a virtual coffee to see him on his way and to provoke his creativity. And you can do that to any denomination and any amount you like. It's another of these modern ways of doing things, which has really helped people like me to sort of produce stuff under their own steam. So for that, I am very grateful, and I'm grateful to those of you that have already done that, and for those that continue to do it. And I understand, though, in these times where I've just seen the price of Tunnock's caramel bars, and they've gone up, and they're probably not the only thing, but they're the ones that caught my eye because they are a particular favourite, even though I'm currently on a diet, so it's probably a good thing. But it's not a good thing that things are going up. I was going to say that basics are going up. Tunnock's caramels are not a basic, but it's still tough that things are... A little bit of joy's going up, though. Actually, a little bit of joy's a basic. Things are going up. The cost of living is getting hard for the majority of us, but not those that make the laws that affect the rest of us. But anyway, let's not get into that. I hope, yes. Anyway, the cost of living is shocking, and the world has a lot of darkness in it at the moment, and life is tricky. So I'm just flattered and amazed and pleased that you find time in your schedule to listen and hopefully enjoy these podcasts. And if you do, what costs you nothing is to go to iTunes and to give them a 5-star review and lots of lines explaining to the curious why they might enjoy these. That really helps. It doesn't cost you anything, and I am very grateful to anybody that gives just a little bit of time to do that. It really does help make these more visible out there in the crowded jungle that is the world of podcasts. So yeah, if you could do that, that'd be great. And social media is the electronic boss that is the embodiment of out of control narcissism. And I am there pumping and singing along and playing my own tune like a megalomaniac computer presence on Haydock Podcasts on Twitter at Toby Haydock and on Instagram at toby.haydock, and I have a Facebook page too. I never actually plugged my own website, which is pretty good. It's very good. Matt Eventon did it, and that has content and old blogs and things like that. I tend to be more vocal now because my typing has got worse and worse and worse, and it's easy to just stay stuff into a microphone. And I think we consume more by listening these days, don't we, on the bus and around the park? I certainly do. I'm trying to start reading again. But if you want reading matter, my website is www.tobyhaydock.com.co.uk. I can't remember. It's one of those two. You'll find it. There we go. That was a good plug, wasn't it? But I do update that every month with a sort of news page at the front to say what I'm up to. If ever you need me if ever you need to find me places and find out what I'm up to right now, because this was recorded probably not when you were listening. So I could be here talking about something that I'm making right now, and it could very well be in the past. I remember when I did Toby Haydock's Who's Round, and I plugged, I think, a 10k run that I was doing. No, that's right. I plugged my West End show, and it actually came out a year later, the one that I'd recorded, because they were subject to a very gradual release rate when the guys at Big Finish could fit them in round other things, and so yes, I'm always a bit wary of making these particularly time specific. 17 minutes past 11 on the 7th of October. Oh no, because my clock's actually fast, because I always have a fast clock, which hopefully means I'm never late for anything. So actually looking at the proper time, it's 4 minutes past 11, Fact Fans, on the 7th of October 2023. So whenever you're listening to this time I've just given is when that is being recorded. So let's not, I don't particularly want to be topical. It's a horrible day for war and destruction and cruelty and unkindness, and the first week of the Cricket World Cup has happened, and I did some last minute tweaks to my fantasy team. I'm in a fantasy league with people like Paul Cornell and Steve Hatcher and Eddie Robson and some non-Doctor Who folk as well, and I subbed out two people at the last minute, both of whom went on to score over 200 points each, and replaced them with people who scored about 70. So, and I thought I'd got a really good team as well, and I'm languishing very near the bottom, and I had such hopes. That is not as bad as all the terrible, dreadful, awful things that are happening in the world, but it's difficult, isn't it? There are wiser people than me that will give all sorts of insight and perspective onto those things. All I can do is do what I do, which is say things out loud that hopefully provide a bit of a distraction, either through humour or through enjoyment, my enjoyment of Doctor Who, or through... I have a simple philosophy in life. It's whoever I encounter, I try to, if I cannot make their day better, at least not make it worse. That's all right, isn't it? I think Doctor Who taught me that. I don't know how I got onto that, but anyway, that's what I'm thinking at now 6 minutes past 11 on Saturday, the 7th of October 2023. It's a very rare, I have done it a few times, positioning of exactly when and where. Well, where am I? I'm in my house. I'm on a sofa when I record these things, which is just taken away from their timelessness, because I'm sure that unlike the Green Death, I don't think anybody will be consuming this 50 years after it is made. But it's doing its job right now, I hope. Well, it's about to stop doing its job, but wherever you are, walking in the park, running, I've run today, feel better for it. I'm not an athlete. I am no athlete. Or on the bus, on the way to work, whatever you're doing. I hope that some of this accident has elements of it that are happy.